Hi guys, and welcome to Heidi's Fish Tank. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm holding the selfie camera, but I was vlogging recently on the Sudden Kimpact channel and some people commented and said, you should post more on the fish channel. So here I am. I've got a couple of videos in mind that I've been wanting to do for a while, but honestly I have so little amount of time where I have space from the kids. So the baby is napping, Roslyn is watching Octonauts, and we're gonna chat. And I'm gonna take a little seat here so I can rest my arm with this little selfie stick situation. So for today's kind of impromptu video, I thought I would do a video about things that I didn't know when I started saltwater keeping that I wish I knew, or that I did know and ignored. And I was like, I know better than these people who've been doing it for years. So I'm coming up on my first year of keeping saltwater. I've had fish for like 23 years. I was always too intimidated to do saltwater, and finally, after a lot of research and some help from one of my favorite local fish stores, I did it. I decided to go ahead and do it. So I have a couple of videos about saltwater, and I have one talking about clownfish, and some of this is going to be counter to what I said in those videos because I am not an expert by any means. I am definitely still learning, and I would hope that I will continue to progress. In a year from now, I might look back at this video and think there's some stuff that I didn't know then. So overall, my fish keeping beliefs are anything can be done. There are exceptions to every rule, but the rules are around for a reason, and research is important. So let's start with that. I used to have a 29-gallon Fowler fish only with live rock tank, and now I have a much larger fish only with live rock tank. I upgraded and I gave my mom the 29 gallons. So I'm running both those tanks now. I do all the maintenance on her tank. Both of them are fish only with live rock right now. And I don't foresee myself getting coral, at least not anytime in the future, although now it is a possibility. I also have a 9-gallon Peninsula nano tank that is supposed to be coming in from Mode Aquariums that I won like a million years ago in a giveaway, but it never got sent to me. So I keep messaging them, and I've had some trouble with their customer service. So that one is all set up for coral. So I may do coral in that tank, just to get my feet wet. So everything I'm going to be talking about is fish only with live rock. Rule number 1, use RODI water. I heard this a million times when I was first setting up the tank, but most of the videos on YouTube are about reef tanks. And so I did a little research and I talked to my local fish stores, and they said, you know, especially with really hardy fish that you're talking about keeping, I keep a lot of captive bred fish, it's fine to use tap water with a dechlorinator, but if you're going to be keeping coral, you want RO. And so I did a lot of research into why people say RO, and most of the videos that I watched were talking about TDS or total dissolved solubles, but they were just really vague about what that was. So I just kind of came to the conclusion that I didn't need to use RO water and or RODI water, and I would be fine with tap water as long as I'm not doing coral. Well, that was all well and good. It worked really well for a year. I tested my tap water to make sure that at least the basic like nitrates and ammonia and all of that stuff was fine, and it was. But then we moved houses, and that's when I upgraded to the bigger tank. And the water at this current house where we live was running perfectly fine. And then one day I did a water change and I lost half of my fish in both of my tanks, my freshwater and my saltwater. Both of my big tanks. I have smaller tanks too that have other fish in them, but I lost half of my fish in both those tanks because the tap water, which was fine previously, suddenly had not only an astronomical amount of nitrates in it, it also had quite a bit of ammonia in it that it didn't previously have. So we ordered an RO system, and it was quite the crisis to put out because these were two really large tanks that I had to lower my nitrate levels in and my ammonia levels in, and I didn't have quick access to enough RO water. So I was like running back and forth to my parents' house, stealing water from them. So my big, beautiful saltwater tank that was like my pride and joy now only has 4 fish in it. One of them I rehomed, and the rest of them died because of this sudden change in my tap water parameters. So when people say use RO water, they mean it. Now, I lost fish in my freshwater tank too, but freshwater is a little bit more forgiving. I lost like 2 platies. It wasn't like, it wasn't this huge crisis, right? So we're switching to RO, and lesson has been learned. Rule number 2 is do your research. Talk to multiple people. There's not as much information available about saltwater when it comes to fish. And so some people do a lot of fish, or fish that are way too big for their tank, or you'll look up something and like on Live Aquaria it will say it needs like a gabillion gallons, and then you go on like Blue Zoo and it says it needs like 10, and you're like, what is it? There's just less people keeping saltwater fish. So use your own logic, test your water, which is how I knew what had happened in my tank. I was testing my water. That's what made me do the water change. Anyways, and kind of just use your own best judgment, which brings me to number 3. Find people that you trust that have been doing this longer than you. So there's 2 in particular that I really, really like. One of my local fish stores has this girl that works there, and she's been nothing but helpful every single time I have ever talked to her. And then at my other local fish store, the guy that helped me set up my first tank that told me tap water was fine is also really, really amazing. So just find experienced people and ask them questions. 3, the third thing that I would say is understanding how to treat illness. Now, typically with my saltwater tank, what I was doing was I was doing a basic quarantine where I would just put them in a little 10-gallon quarantine system, which is more than most people do. A lot of people don't quarantine at all, and then I would just observe. But I've started proactively treating fish. So instead of waiting until I see a sign of illness, I'm just acting as though every fish that comes in is probably ill. And along with that, I'm probably going to do a separate video on this. There are ways to treat fish in quarantine that are very, very easy and that don't cost extra. In fact, they cost less. So for example, I really, really like running hyposalinity when I'm treating for ick, for example. Or I've had tang disease, or I've had tang disease, which is not always on tangs, but it's also called black ick. And again, hyposalinity is a great treatment for that. It treats all kinds of parasites, but I really like it for treating ick. And I have seen it work over and over again. Understanding ick is really important, and I should probably do a separate video on that, especially if you're going to be keeping coral, because you can't really treat for ick in a reef tank, no matter what people tell you. But just having a basic understanding of, okay, so if we want to treat for flukes, a freshwater dip. So everything that comes into my tanks goes into a freshwater dip before I put it in quarantine. And then in the quarantine tank, it runs at hyposalinity, which treats for ick. And then I just observe for things like Brooklinella, which I've never had. I've never had velvet on my fish either. The only illnesses that I've really had on the saltwater fish are black ick and ick. But just having things on hand like formalin or ProziPro if you need to treat makes a huge difference. And then the last thing that I would say is just know that what you think you want is going to change. There are things that I did well, like I came up with a fish plan and know like my stocking order, which brings me to another point that I wish I had made. Don't willy-nilly buy fish. Every time that I have bought a fish without looking it up, minus my Caribbean hawkfish, which I loved that fish. It died in the great tragedy. But every time I've bought a fish without first looking it up and and knowing like this is what I want and having it part of my plan. Every time I've gone to the fish store and bought a fish spontaneously, I have regretted it. So for example, I recently bought a Seals cardinal, which is not a very common cardinal fish. And I knew, okay, it's a cardinal. I like cardinals. I've been wanting a cardinal. I'll go ahead and get this one because it was inexpensive and I'd never seen it before and it looked really cool. So I bought it on a whim. And especially with saltwater fish, don't buy fish on a whim. I did Google it on my phone and all of that and did like a quick search, so that's something. But then I put it in my tank and it beat up everything. I mean, this cardinal was attacking a damsel. It was attacking fish that were like 3 times its size. And there's, again, it comes back to there's not a lot of information out there. I can't find anything on that fish because it's not commonly kept. But again, it wasn't originally on my fish plan. It wasn't a fish that I had planned on keeping. And I veered off my plan because I was like, oh, that's cool. So don't do that. Plan your fish, plan the order that you're going to put them in. These things are much more important in saltwater where aggression is important to mitigate than in freshwater. So that is definitely something that I've learned. And then another thing is, go to your local fish stores and go to ones that have really good quarantine procedures. My 2 favorite local fish stores have really, really great quarantine procedures and I trust them. And even though they have good quarantine procedures, I still quarantine my fish. In fact, that fish that I got that had black ick came from one of those stores because it's just one of those things where there's no way around it. Your fish can get sick. When there's that many fish going through their systems, your fish can get sick. And if you're not going to quarantine, which a lot of people don't, I think in a fowler, it's not the end of the world because you can treat the entire tank if you have to. So for example, my mom's tank, we will often add fish without quarantining. So I just did this whole rant about how you need to quarantine. But that tank runs at hyposalinity, and that tank is going to continue to run at hyposalinity until we are done stocking all of her fish, and then I will very slowly raise the salinity back up. And again, a lot of things can be treated with freshwater dips and hyposalinity. Those 2 things alone make a huge, huge difference. So those are the things that I've kind of learned in the first year of keeping saltwater fish. I've done some upgrades in the last year. I've upgraded the tank and I've gotten the RO system. I've gotten a nice protein skimmer on the tank. And I've learned a lot about all kinds of things. And I think now that we're getting the RO system, I may eventually do corals, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until the tank is entirely stocked with all of the fish that I want and then get corals. So it could be a long time. It could be a really, really long time. But if I'm using RO water anyways, maybe just some really easy soft corals, things that a lot of people think of as pest corals like xenia and GSP, green star polyps, those kinds of things. So let me know in the comments what you wish you had known when you first started keeping saltwater fish, or what maybe you had heard other people say and you're like, no, that's not going to happen to me, because that's totally what happened to me with the RO system. I was like, no, my water's fine. It wasn't fine. So let me know in the comments, or if you haven't kept saltwater fish, what is keeping you from doing so? And then lastly, if you guys do keep reef tanks, let me know what corals you keep, because I don't know. Some of the fish that I want that are on my stocking plan, for example, a spot band butterfly fish, are not reef safe, so I don't know if I really do want to do coral, because I'm not sure I'm willing to sacrifice some of those fish in order to have the coral. But maybe at the end of all my stocking, maybe I'll do it. So let me know in the comments, good starter corals, things that you wish you had known when you started out, or what's keeping you from doing it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I don't know when I will post another video over here. I have some freshwater ideas that I really want to post. those kinds of things. And a lot of people have been wanting to see my tanks. Right now they look awful because I lost so many fish in the great nitrate ammonia problem of tap water. And I downsized quite a lot of my fish. Like I got rid of my goldfish when I moved because we originally thought that we were moving from this very large house to an apartment that wouldn't let me keep my big tanks. So I downsized and I got rid of quite a few fish, and then we ended up buying this house. So that did allow me to have my 2 big tanks, which I'm super excited about, and another one on the way actually. So I may get goldfish back. But anyways, I hope that you guys like this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Oh, and down below I started a beta page on Facebook. There's like 8 people on it, so I feel like lonely and nobody wants to see what my page has to do with betas. I've just found that a lot of beta pages get negative pretty fast, so I was like, I'll start my own. So I'll link that down below. Subscribe, and we'll talk to you when we talk to you again.